Hi everyone, Therese here, and I have with me again today my good friend and my emotional eating expert, Amber Romanuik.
You
Yes,
got it.
I got it the
Hi.
first time.
You got it.
So just to remind you, so Amber's been on the show before, and I wanted to bring her back because we have so much good information going on about ascension and the body, and it's been so helpful to have her guidance through this. And I'm like, every time we hit on something, I'm like, we got to share it. So just to remind you, Amber specializes in not only emotional eating, but digestive and hormone health. And she helps so many professional women come back into acceptance and love with their body. I mean, Amber, do you want to add to that? You're
You,
amazing. You're amazing.
oh, thank you, and so are you. No, that's truly, and it's really to empower them because as our conversation is going to lead into today, the more we can take our power back and become in tune with our bodies, we open more up to that intuition. We open up our third eye. Like it's just we just come into such alignment and power when we can address these things that keep us so distracted or distraught with our bodies and our health.
Absolutely. And, ascension includes the body.
Yeah.
It's so easy to kind of get fixated or focused on the spiritual aspects of ascension. But as my team keeps reminding me, this is the very first time that they have attempted moving a body up in frequency to another density. Usually what happens in the past, this is, as I understand it, what has happened in the past is that the physical body would be kind of shut off and the spirit would be moved into a vessel that's more in alignment with the new density. But this is a time, one of the reasons we're all here and why it's so exciting and we had to be here is because we will be moving with the body. The body is going to ascend and change and stay here. So what we can do to help ourselves move into a higher frequency, it's really important to look at that. And it's not always something that we think about. We're not, when we're thinking ascension, at least for me, I'm thinking psychic ability and I'm thinking glowy rainbow lights around me.
Yeah.
Not really thinking about what my digestive system is doing, but this is crucial. So we're going to talk today specifically about how our extrasensory perception tools, our clair tools, and I'm going to talk about that, how they are directly impacted by food and other types of vibration that we're going to get into today. We're going to talk about the 4 major clairs. So that is clairvoyance, which is clear sight. Clairvoyance is the ability to, it's really the ability to access your pineal gland and see with your third eye. Clairaudience, which is clear hearing or the ability to hear that which isn't physically present. So this one people get confused about a lot too, because this one a lot of people associate with like hearing disembodied voices outside of you, which is very rare actually for clairaudience. That's not a common trait, and it's even not the most efficient trait. And one of the things when you start working with spirit, you understand they're all about efficiency. They don't like to waste. The universe does not like to waste energy. It's very exact and precise. It's mathematical in nature. So they're not about waste. So if a disembodied voice were to appear, it would be for a very specific reason. And usually it's because a person needs to move into belief and they're not moving into it. And so you get sometimes a little tiny taste just to get you kind of like, oh, awake and aware. But clairaudience is that inner voice, the inner voice of your higher self. Many times your spirit team, you can hear snippets of words. A lot of times it's song lyrics. I know a lot of us respond to that. And a lot of us get those. It's like you get a song lyric, for example, stuck in your head on a loop. And it's almost like until you acknowledge it or maybe even listen to the full song, it won't go away, right? Amber and I were just talking about that. And we have songs stuck in our head right now. Let's talk about clairsentience, which is the clear feeling. So now this one, I think a lot of people recognize and resonate with because it is that the feelings in your body. It's the tingles, the goosebumps, the knots in your stomach if there's something to get your attention, or the butterfly feeling, the feeling of vibrating. Or clairsentience can also have to do with physical touch, like maybe you touch something and you get information off of that. That's actually called psychometry, but it's connected to clairsentience. So it's that feeling, you're not, it's an intuitive nudge through a feeling sensation, emotional and physical. And then there's claircognizance, which is one of the harder ones to spot, but I think that everybody gets this one too. Claircognizance would be considered like clear thinking or clear thought. And the best way I can describe it is it's like a download into your brain. So you immediately know something and you don't know how you know it. You just do. For example, if someone were to ask you something about, I think, what is it, Iceland? I remember I was playing Trivial Pursuit once, and I think it was, what's the capital of Iceland? And I just was like, Reykjavik. And it just appeared. I'm like, I don't even know the word.
Nice.
But I know I won that round. But it often comes like that. It's like you just know something, and it's a full download into your mind. And this is often ways that our team and spirit, our guides, will communicate with us, right? Because it's very efficient. They don't need to explain to you how they got it or how you got to that conclusion. They just put it right in there. And in fact, with ascension comes many of these claircognizant downloads. They're also kind of like memory switches that get turned on. So cellular memory activation, like from your past lives or past knowledge that you have acquired that are held within your DNA. Claircognizance is sort of like the switch that turns those on at the appropriate time. And it's usually triggered many times by other people. So you don't know something until you're with another person. For example, a lot of times with Amber, I will learn things about the body that I didn't know because I'm actually tuning into her higher consciousness, and it acts like a download, and same and vice versa with her as well. So claircognizance is a beautiful gift. So let's talk, Amber. Let us talk about food and the effect on these extra sensory abilities that everyone has. Some aspects are dormant in people and some are on. Before we go into the specific foods, just tap into your intuition. Why would food affect psychic ability?
That's a great question. And now that we're here having this conversation and reflecting back on my journey, it's just no wonder I felt so shut off and struggled with a lot of different, negative emotions and heaviness, because it's not only things in our environment that impact our psychic capabilities, but really what we are putting in our bodies. And so I think one of the biggest, things is that not only do these certain processed foods or things that are made in a lab, pull our frequency down, pull our energy levels down, the more symptoms we have physically. So say you eat something and then you get really bloated or pain or you get constipated, now you're focused and frustrated on your symptom. And because a lot of people, we've been programmed that symptoms are inconvenient and you should get mad at your body and your body's out to get you. And so I think it keeps people kind of over here distracted with this cycle of like, it sucks. My body sucks. I can't eat these foods and makes me bloated. And I wish I could be like everyone else and blah, 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 blah. But what happens is, the more symptoms we have and the more negative emotions we project at them, I think it just, again, it lowers our frequency and it really disconnects us from, self-love and worth and these capabilities, instead of us realizing we have all of this within us, but we need to rediscover how to get back to it. And particularly, with the third eye, the pineal gland, like there are so many things that calcify it. And so then that shuts things down. And not even just foods, but for me, one of my things that really like decalcified mine, I feel back in March, was when we shut the TV off and got rid of Netflix because of the frequencies. And that was really empowering when that happened. So it's so interesting to see environmental and then, what we're putting in our body and the emotional charge we have toward our symptoms and, the foods we're putting in our body. So the other example is, say you eat sugar and then you feel guilty, right? So then
Yes.
there's that whole cycle again. And not only is that calcifying the feel good, it's also, again, pulling your frequency down. And now you're projecting it yourself and shame on me. How come I don't have the willpower? And all of this just takes us away from our true essences of our intuition and all of these, beautiful capabilities that you were just talking about.
Right. Totally. Okay, so my next question then, and it kind of goes in alignment with everything you said, would you say the food itself has a certain frequency?
100%. So anything closer to nature has a higher frequency. The more something's been processed, the longer the shelf life, right? The more ingredients you can't pronounce, the lower the frequency, the food. I do believe we can bless our food and we can ask it for the frequency to be risen, and we can clear certain things out of the food, because it's not about perfection. However, yes, I think that plays a huge role. And that's why, when you listen to certain people right now, they're like, drink lots of filtered water and lots of fresh fruits and vegetables and,
right,
as close to nature as possible, because those kinds of things raise our frequency, and it's going to be more your fast foods, your processed sugars and carbs, and more wheats and dairies and alcohol and smoking and things like that are just going to pull your frequency down. And then you'll be going, why do I feel tired? Why do I feel upset today? What's going on?
Right. You know what I just thought about? I was learning about Nikola Tesla, and Nikola Tesla was a vegan. And I'm not promoting any kind of vegan diet. I just want to share one of the things that he said about food that really, it made sense why we need the fresh fruit and vegetable in our diet, right? And at least increased amounts in our diet. And he said the reason why is because the solar energy is being captured by these plants. And it's in its closest form to pure solar energy as we can get. So even meat gets solar energy too, but it gets processed inside the animal, and so therefore it steps down in frequency. So these fruits and vegetables have a high amount of solar energy, and a lot of this, a lot of cosmic information is held within the sun. So I thought that's really interesting, and it's aligning with what you're saying here. So if we're eating a heavily processed food that's lower in frequency, we can pretty much assume then, right, that our emotional frequency is going to go down because of that, unless we have this consciousness to maybe counter it or.
Yeah. And then if you pile on that your negative association that you likely have to that food because it's bad, I don't have control over it, makes me bloated, I don't want to gain weight, but I just really want this, right? Like when we have all those negative projections and attachments, then you double up the lowering of the frequency, because now you're already, giving your power away to your ego and going into those negative emotions, and then you eat the food and guilt, right? Afterwards, some people.
And I find that to be a difficult one personally to overcome. Like if I know something about a food is negative, it is actually harder for me to counter that because I already have a belief or an understanding. Even if I call it an understanding, it becomes belief. Like, so, right. So for example, I have no guilt around having my first cup of coffee in the day because I'm like, one cup of coffee, not a bad thing. I love coffee in the morning, gets me going. And I'm in alignment with that. Right. But when I have that second one, if I have a second one, there are weird associations. And it's not even something that I would say starts as emotional, maybe. Like, for example, having the second cup of coffee, I'm thinking, oh, this makes me jittery. That's the thought. But behind that is the emotion of guilt because I did something wrong. Right. So I've lowered my own frequency.
Yeah. And that's why I think it's so important with the food piece that, yes, we can be educated and aware that, certain foods can contribute to inflammation and XYZ. But if we have these really strong limiting beliefs, it's so important that we work on neutralizing them so we can go, you know what? I'm going to enjoy this piece of cake. I'm going to enjoy it mindfully, eat it slowly, enjoy this experience, just like my next experience of listening to that song and dancing around my house. And when we have that in negative or that positive association, and then we can say, I trust my body. I trust my body's ability to break this down and use everything, and anything else my body will eliminate. We can get to that place. It completely alters us to a cellular level and our abilities to process and move forward. And it's so funny because something I say to my clients is, if you had a negative association with an apple and you psyched yourself out before you ate the apple, you're likely to get a stomach ache and the bloating and the symptoms. But versus if you have the cake and you're like, I'm neutral, I'm good, I trust my body, I'm blessing the cake, you may have a minimized chance of getting those reactions because you're not reactive, you're sitting in a state of neutrality. And naturally, because of that, your vibration stays higher too, right?
So what I'm hearing from you, and tell me if I got this right, is that before we engage with a food, I mean, pretty much any food, but truly any food that we might hold something, a lower emotion around, we need to bring that consciousness in before we eat it and be like, what do I think about this?
Yes,
You know, what are the thoughts and feelings that are coming through as I get closer to this thing? Because you're right. You know, nothing in the universe is asking us to be all one way. It doesn't want that. In fact, it says excess in any direction leads to evil. It's weird, but it's true, right? So the idea that we have to be perfect about it or we have to deny anything is actually going to cause us more pain and lower our frequency anyway.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing, because I was thinking, okay, well, what's the antidote to that before I have that, if I'm going to have that second cup of coffee, like I did today, then I need to really think about, like, take out that moment, right? To be conscious with it and say, you know, maybe I like to investigate. I like to ask myself questions, but what are some other things we could do to get into alignment so that we can stay in at least a neutral frequency?
Yeah, I think it's so important to, if you're having these negative associations with food, to just do some reflection on what negative association do I have and why, where did this come from? Did you inherit it from a diet? Were you told, oh, that's bad, you shouldn't eat that, or you'll gain weight, or whatever it is?
Yeah.
And explore that and then go, okay, well, you know, moderation. This isn't about perfection. This is about moderation. So what do I need to do to deal with those limiting beliefs? You do EFT tapping. You work on your relationship with food and your body. You know, you have to journal about it and just really spend time understanding it. But over time, you know, when we can go, like, it's safe for me to eat this food and I have power of choice, I get to choose what I want to put in my body, and I'm going to choose really great nourishing food. And I can also choose balance and mindful indulgence, or, you know, having this, and it leaves us in this empowered state. So I think that those are some things for people to explore, and then the key is really to lovingly let go of diets and diet mentalities, because that's where all the rules and regulations really crop up, and then you have all these food fears and rules that are just lowering your frequency, you know, having you feel like you have to stick to this rigidity.
Right. And I love that we're talking about this right now before we start mentioning these foods that can disrupt psychic ability and lower emotions, because this is a really good thing to keep in mind. That this is not like we're not giving you rules. We're not telling you don't. This is only to inform about frequency, because ascension really is about frequency, and the timeline we get to experience is completely based on our own individual frequency. There are many timelines happening together, and we can sometimes we experience multiple in a day because we shift in vibration. So our intention with sharing this information certainly is, there is no shame, there is no rules, there is no-nos. It is simply to give information. And of course, you know, it's my son's birthday tomorrow. We're going to have cake. We're going to enjoy the crap out of that cake, because that's what you do, right? Yeah. That's what you do. And even though sugar is probably going to appear somewhere on the list saying, hey, this is going to block this kind of frequency, again, our own intention and our consciousness is more powerful than anything that is put in front of us. It's us that makes the food go up or down. Yeah. The baseline food that's in front of us, it definitely has its own frequency, but like Amber was saying, you can bless it. Our consciousness can change it. And in general, like if you're trying to increase a certain Claire, that we're going to talk a certain psychic ability, then hopefully this list will provide some helpful answers, and you can play around with it and see, you know, like when I eat more carrots, yeah, suddenly my eyes, you know, suddenly my third eye does perk up, and you know, you never know. All right. I love that. That's such a good point. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. So what I have in front of me are a list of foods for each of the different clairs. And I'm just going to ask Amber, I'm going to talk to her about the ones that are suggested to avoid. And I'm going to ask her, why would you think that they would suggest avoiding that type of food or stimulant, I guess. And then we're going to look at the ones that would benefit it. I'm going to ask her what she's seeing there. Like, what's the pattern that you're seeing? And why do you think that that's associated with this clair? Okay. So I thought this was really fun when we did it privately. I was like, ooh, we got to talk about it. All right. So we're going to start with clairvoyance, which again is psychic seeing. And it's literally, I'd like to clarify this even more. Clairvoyance tends to be a blanket term for psychic ability. It kind of gets meshed together with the idea of psychic ability. So clairvoyance is really that ability to see with your mind something that is not physically present. So if I said to you, picture a white elephant, are you seeing it? Are you seeing a white elephant? Can you see the environment it's standing in? Now I want you to see it holding a red balloon. Now you can see that. All of that is clairvoyance. It's that ability to kind of bring up this picture with your mind, to see in color, to see depth, to see things that aren't right in front of you. So if you can do that, and you can do it with ease, and most of us can, especially when we think about places that we've been, right? And a lot of us think of it as memory, but we need to understand that one of the components of memory is your own psychic seeing, which is so cool. Okay, so I'm going to list to you the different foods or aspects that can clog clairvoyance. You're going to tell me what you see in common. Okay, so what we've got is caffeine, alcohol, and fluoride. So go for it. Why would these block your third eye, your pineal gland?
Yeah, so because they calcify the pineal gland. And so essentially it's like fluoride, phosphorus, calcium deposits just can build up when we age, especially if we're heavily exposed to these things on a regular basis. And so then of course this really can block that capability. So I think too, there's other aspects of it though. Again, the frequency is lower, the inflammation that these can create in people, and then how that not only impacts your third eye, but I think every capability is somehow connected to that intuition in the solar plexus area, and that's like your digestive, right? So if you're bloated and inflamed and you're constipated and that's not working properly, of course that's going to have an impact on
so you're saying that all three of those have the ability to calcify the pineal gland. And for those who don't understand what calcification of our pineal gland is, can you explain that?
Yeah, so essentially what it is it's a build up of things like fluoride, phosphorus, and calcium deposits which build up around the area.
Like a shell. It's almost like a shell.
Yeah.
Like an eggshell.
Yeah, and it can happen there. It can happen in other areas. Your appendix as well. You can get.
Is that what stones are? Is that what gallstones are?
Yeah, it can be similar in the kidney stones. For me, like I used to have so many issues with my appendix, and finally just took it out because it kept reacting, and they found so many calcifications in it that were causing the flare up in the inflammation. So it's really interesting how it can show up in different areas. And of course, that was before I had a healthy relationship with my body. And so I can just imagine, what I was exposing myself to that made that happen. So, but it can build up over time for people. And then essentially, this quote unquote shell is there, and it really impacts your ability to use that capability, intuitively, psychically.
And we can decalcify, right?
Of course, 100%. Just like with anything, your body's always wanting to heal. It's just that we're usually by accidentally getting in the way somehow.
Okay. Okay. So good. So now I'm going to just read off the list of foods that are beneficial to the third eye, to clairvoyance. And you're just going to tell me what you hear that connects all of these. So we've got sun-ripened organic fruits such as pineapple, dark leafy greens, broccoli, coconut, mango, grapefruit, kale, watermelon, blueberries, strawberries, and spinach.
Yeah, oh my gosh, all my favorites. So a lot of those are actually rich in magnesium, and magnesium is very important for decalcification of the pineal gland because it helps to block the absorption of fluoride. into the cells of the body. So then therefore it can't go up and kind of build that shell, and or maybe if it's somewhere else in your body that you're having the issue. So where, you know, you may say, well, I eat those foods and it's still happening. A lot of people are deficient in magnesium because when you're in a heightened state of stress or you're eating lots of processed foods, you burn through your magnesium more quickly and then your stores reduce.
Wow. Wow. I mean that, you know, I take magnesium supplement and I feel so much better when I do. And I know I had known for years that it was related to feeling calmer. Why is that? Why is magnesium related? Oh, because you just said it, because when we're stressed out, we're burning through magnesium, right? So
Yeah.
when we restore it, we naturally sort of calm down.
Yeah, so with stress, we burn through all of our minerals more quickly and our B12, which is the energy vitamin. So if you're supplementing with magnesium, you're building your levels back up, and magnesium calms the nervous system down. It relaxes the mind, the muscles, in the body, and helps promote better bowel health. If you are, you know, struggling with that and you're constipated, so it's really meant to relax, and it's also very alkalizing, and that's
Awesome.
important for immunity and keeping bacteria
Yeah.
at bay and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I love taking it at night. I definitely can feel my, like the muscle relaxing. And I know that potassium's good for leg cramps, but interestingly enough, I respond to magnesium too.
Yeah, some people do. And it's like, this is the gift of your own unique body and what works for you, because different things work for different people. And it even, certain strains of magnesium may work better for some people, you know, rather than others. So it's just so cool to see the unique response of each person.
That is so awesome. So everybody who wants to up their magnesium naturally, looks like strawberries, blueberries, watermelon, spinach, kale, like all of those, broccoli, coconut, mango. I mean, this is like all the good stuff.
Yeah.
It's all the good stuff. Dark leafy greens.
Almonds, I think you maybe said that. Figs too are high in magnesium, so that's kind of a nice little sweet one to throw in there. Bananas too.
Awesome. I didn't know that. I didn't know I knew they were high in potassium. I didn't know magnesium too.
Yeah, and
Man.
I think and the other factor with all this, like, I know it's I intuitively have some kind of energetic feeling that the inflammation interferes or makes the calcification worse. It's just a download I'm getting right now, because obviously you're burned, like if you're deficient in magnesium and then your body's stressed out, you're more inflamed, you're burning through your magnesium more quickly. That would.
You know what I'm seeing? Okay, so they're showing me inflammation happens everywhere, even the pineal gland, like you're saying. If there was a shell on it and you're pressing against it, right? Right? That's like tension headaches. Aren't those what tension headaches are? It's like your muscles pressing against your skull a little bit.
Either that or sluggish lymphatics.
Okay. Yeah. So I can totally see how inflammation and inflammation, right, is usually a signal that we're in stress as well, right?
For sure. Yeah. So fight or flight, high stress, and that usually there's some kind of digestive disruption going on, but that doesn't mean you have to get bloated. So I think that, you know, inflammation just puts us into a heightened state of fight or flight, and then you burn through your minerals more quickly. And then of course that impacts, like you said, this kind of shell and the pressure, which can contribute to the tension headaches, and the sluggish lymphatics can contribute to the tension headaches. And I think just overall that makes us more inflamed. So it's so interesting how all the different body systems can be so connected, and how they can impact one thing, which then impacts, you know, energetic, spiritual gifts.
Right. And I mean, it's so interesting because it creates this feedback loop, right? I mean, a lot of times we get stuck in a feedback loop. And I think that because we're used to compartmentalizing things, you know, when we're, especially people who are actively working on trying to open up their connection with their higher self, with their guides, and they're struggling with it, and they don't, you know, they're really doing the work. They're really taking the time out. They're meditating. They're focusing in. And I'm hoping that what this shows is that it's all, you know, it's an ecosystem that we're working with here. All of it's connected together. And, you know, doing the meditation and the work is great, and that it's necessary, and you do that. But when you do that combined with this awareness of how the body's reacting, and then you start attending to that, right? You start nurturing the body, you'll see that the channels just seem to open up. It's like you've unblocked a dam in a way.
Yeah. And for people who get frustrated because they're meditating and they're not having this experience, it could be because you need to decalcify your pineal gland, and then you'll have a more heightened or like clarity or whatever it is that, because meditation is great to also help decalcify the pineal gland. But if you're eating or just it's already there, don't get frustrated. It's not because you don't have the capabilities. There could be other things blocking it.
Right. And to add to that, the word frustration also blocks us from being able to receive. It's interesting because, we do have to get into this state of complete relaxation. We have to literally let go to get it. It's, one of those spiritual paradoxes where you have to completely detach and surrender from outcome to actually start receiving. So having that emotional awareness too, and just know, like, there are days where, I connect into spirit all the time, but there are days where I'm meditating and I'm like all over the place and I'm too frustrated and like there's too much noise in the background and I'm not fully present, but I've done it long enough to know that that's just a bad connection moment. It's not an inability in myself. It's just momentary. And the more that you start seeing how this all connects, the more you get to experience it, the easier you just start recognizing. You're like, you stop blaming yourself so much or doubting your own ability, and you start seeing like, no, I have to tune up a little bit. There's a tune up opportunity here. Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about clairsentience, which again is psychic feeling and getting those, some of it's emotional. Usually it's a physical feeling associated with some emotion. For example, when you get that tightness in your gut, when you feel like something's wrong, there's a tightening literally, and then there's this apprehension that comes with it. Or when you're onto something, if you get these tingles or the goosebumps or the shivers, right? That's a feeling, but you have this feeling of I'm close. Those come together. As examples. So let's talk about foods that are out of alignment with clairsentience. We've got animal fats, fried foods, refined sugar, alcohol, saturated fats, cigarette smoke, chemicals, foods containing lichen, like uncooked legumes such as beans, spicy foods, caffeine, chemical additives, GMOs, and dairy products. So why would that block?
So I think a lot of it, especially the pesticides, the chemicals, the smoke, it really gets stuck in your field. And I think that really impacts capabilities. I think especially like the dairy, the animal fats, the fast food and all that kind of stuff, for me, the big thing is it really just pulls the frequency down, and it's just harder to feel and tune in when your frequency's low, when that, chakra's blocked, right? Like, I think that's an overall for all of the senses, like, because it's so interesting. My clients always say to me after they're overcoming emotional eating, my intuition and my intuitive senses are like tenfold.
Yeah. So you know what, you said something that triggered something in me. Numbing out, right? So when we numb out, we don't feel emotionally, but this is also dulling almost on a psychic level. It's not dulling your physical touch. You can touch things, but you're not picking up the information necessarily off of it. And I'm looking at the list here of what could dull, like cigarette smoke, alcohol, refined sugar. These are all things that we would do to numb out, right?
For sure.
Chemicals, because chemicals is a pretty broad spectrum. There's a lot of things that can fall under chemicals, right? One of the ones that you talked to me about where I was like blown away. Can you just share a little bit about casein? When you told me about casein, I was like, what? Because casein and sugar, let Amber take it away.
Yeah, and same with gluten. So gluten, casein, refined sugar, aspartame, and MSG. Essentially, to be specific with casein, it's the protein found in dairy, and it's in its highest concentration in cheese. And I find a lot of people struggle with cheese and cheese addiction, and the thought of reducing the intake to help improve digestion or whatever it is, there's a huge emotional reaction or charge that comes along with that for people because they're just so attached to it because of the high or the pleasure feeling they get upon consuming it. So essentially, when you consume the cheese, the casein contains something called casomorphins. And so when you hear morph, It's just like more fleeting like that. It excites the same part of the brain as heroin. And
Wow.
so it's like your brain has this chemical experience where you produce an opioid-like response and you get a high. And then again, because you're having this high, you store in the pleasure center of your brain this pleasure memory, and then you associate pleasure with that food. And so when you are sad or you want to numb out, you go, oh, I'm going to eat cheese because remember that last time and this happened and it felt so good. But it's literally been designed so that we are so addicted to it. And that, like, technically, I guess they educate you that cheese is high in calcium, and that too much calcium calcifies the pineal gland.
Yeah.
So it's also so interesting how that whole thing works out. But yeah, the casomorphin, it literally is like doing heroin because of the way that it impacts the brain chemistry.
Wow. So things that help us to numb out our feelings have a tendency to block our intuitive ability to sense things through feelings, and also through the subtle signals, physical signals that our body gives us.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just think of how in tune you become as you're, cleaning up your eating. And it's not about that you can't ever have it, but the more you're eating closer to nature, you're just more in tune. And then maybe you have the day where you've had that whole piece, you've had pizza and whatever else, and you're like, oh, I'm so foggy. I'm off today. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Or just how, I mean, it's interesting. So again, and when we bring our consciousness back to it, noticing like that moment of, I had it, right? I'm going to have it. I want it. And I'm okay with that. But then also like paying attention afterwards, like how connected do I feel?
Mm-hmm.
What do I want to do now that I've had it? Usually for me, I get really sleepy, right? Like that, which is a form of kind of like numbing out too. It's just like, I want to curl up in a ball and just lay there.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay. So now let's look at the list of foods that can enhance the feeling abilities in the body emotionally, and those subtle feelings. So beans and legumes, which were on the don't side, but only uncooked. Now, when you cook them, now they're helping you.
Destroys the lectin.
Because of what? Destroying the lectin?
So the heating and the cooking of the legumes, it destroys the lectin. So the lectin's gone.
Okay, great. So we've got beans, we've got broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, organic nuts, sea vegetables, squash, carrots, yams, beets, raspberries, sweet potatoes, red peppers, tomatoes, cantaloupe, papaya, dark leafy greens, sunflower seeds, pistachio nuts, bananas, avocado, spinach, kale, asparagus, and oranges. So what's the intuitive hit here?
Mm-hmm. So part of it is the alkalinity, because most of that stuff is really alkaline. So it takes you to a higher frequency. It's almost like you're lighter emotionally, energetically, spiritually.
When you eat alkaline, doesn't that bring you closer to homeostasis?
Yes, exactly. So it brings your body closer to balance. Your immune system is strong. Bacteria and bugs can't take over. It's really hard to get sick. It is really that equilibrium that we strive to have. And then the other thing is a lot of these foods you mentioned are really, really rich in vitamin C, which is again really good for immunity, antioxidant. And when I think antioxidant, it helps to fight off free radicals, or just things in the body that don't want to be there. And again, that brings us back to our homeostasis and alkalinity. So very much a combination. There's other things in there, but those are the things that really feel in alignment.
So it's interesting because on the negative side of the list, we've got a lot of stuff that's introduced to our system that shouldn't be there. And then on the positive side of the list, we have things that literally clean out the stuff that shouldn't be there. Exactly. Interesting. So it's almost like what they're showing me visually in my mind is like, imagine your auric field, right? And it having like almost a bunch of like, they're showing me like push pins or pins pushed into it. These are things that shouldn't be there. Mm-hmm. And homeostasis is the ability to push that out and clear the field.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, good. All right, so now let's move on to clairaudience, which is that ability to hear clearly. This will be interesting. So the foods to avoid, and one of them's not a food, but actually two of them aren't food. So the foods to avoid are fried foods, and then we have cigarette smoke, and then we have loud noises, which is kind of like environmental, right? So what seems to be the through line?
The word clog keeps coming up pertaining to the fried food. To me, there's not only, of course, something about how it lowers the frequency and with any of these gifts, but to me, the way that it impacts your, I guess you could start with your digestion, and the inflammation that it creates. And because of the inflammation and the suppression of immunity, like you see someone who has a chronic ear infection all the time. Well, why is that? Well, there may be energetic and emotional components going on, but you have to think of, okay, any kind of infection means my immunity is low. So is it possible that with this sense, particularly the reason, of course, obviously the loud noise is because of the frequency and that's where you're taking it in is through the ear. So there's a lot of sensitivity there. But if your body's already you're in a heightened sense of say stress or overwhelm and you're having anxiety, loud noise will just push you over the edge and can fuel a lot more of that. And that's because your system's already like, I'm spilling over, I don't have anything left, and now here you are, this noise or the smoke or putting this food in my body, I don't have the capacity. And so for me, I just something about clogging that connection with that capability comes up.
When you said that, the word that popped into my head was viscous. A viscous feeling, right? So like obviously the slipperiness and the greasy, the thickness of fried food, and what it changes the air, the smoke, right? We all feel that. We immediately feel it change, and it's like a thickening is what's happening. And something about the loud sounds, it's like thickening in the ear, like the ear has to close tighter to it reacts to it by a clenching, or it feels like thickening. Okay, so then on the positive side that can help your clairaudience, we have flax seeds or flax oil, nuts, broccoli, green leafy vegetables, citrus fruits, beans, peas, lentils, avocado, Brussels sprouts, seeds, celery, carrots, squash, corn, cauliflower, rice, bananas, potatoes, and pomegranates.
What a good list. So there's something about the fats, especially so the seeds and things like that. There's this just really important anti-inflammatory effect. Also, a lot of these items, including the nuts and seeds, have the fats, which is very important for calming the nervous system down. It's this like insulation. So I think it's so important that especially if we have these external factors that are impacting, we have to know we can put things into the body that are going to help the ground and realign. And so if there's loud noises or you're having the fast food and this clogging thing is happening and it's blocking your ability, I think calming inflammation is so important because it does impact and connect to everything, boosting your immune system as well because you're insulating your nervous system. And then, when you're talking about the greens, and again, that's all magnesium, broccoli, greens. And then, just looking at, again, this concept of antioxidants fighting free radicals, because especially with the smoke and the fast food, like that, it just puts it's almost like you have these little invaders walking around in your body and your little armies having to go in and continually attack, and that's tiring. So
yeah, it's so interesting because we're talking about good fats now, and we've got on the list, we've got a bad fat, and then we've got good fats. And I was asking internally, and they're like, it's the difference between viscous, which is the negative, and lubrication, which is positive, like just letting things move through, smoothing the way, right? Like smoothing, even like, I don't know, like they said this idea of like lubrication is really important for this internal listening. Right? That's so interesting.
Like a lot of people who don't have good bowel movements is because they're not eating enough fat, and you need that lubrication in the intestinal lining to move your bowels.
Right. Wow. Okay. So then the last one, we're talking about claircognizance, which are these like just instant kind of downloads, packets of knowledge that come in. And again, this one is probably out of all of them, I would say the one that we can control the least, because it's almost divinely timed, or it's triggered by something else. Usually I find it's triggered by something outside of me, either a person or an event or an energy coming in. So just putting that out there. The foods to avoid, we have caffeine, refined sugar, alcohol, and gluten. And that's interesting. So, because we kind of talked about that, but let's loop back because it comes back up again.
Yeah, so I think part of it, the first part that comes up is they all calcify the pineal gland, and I think there is an aspect of that in these, right, intuitive hits
Right.
coming in. I think because the gluten excites the same part of the brain as heroin and has that, you know, pleasure receptor chemical reactions, and the sugar too, and then the caffeine calcifying the pineal gland. So I think that there's those aspects of the brain chemistry and that really can impact, and they all pull your frequency down. And so, as we've been talking about, and I mentioned earlier, it's really hard for your intuitive gift to be stronger if you're constantly numbing, suppressing, and going off of a chemical like response instead of.
And I was gonna say, like, all four of these have an emotional component. I would like to say caffeine doesn't, but I know it does.
Yeah.
It so does.
Yeah.
Right? I can tell in the morning, I'm like, I don't want to do it till I have my coffee. That's emotional.
Yeah.
That's an emotional component. So interesting. So it's like anything that's, and this is true about psychic ability. You actually have to detach emotionally as well to get to get better info. You have to emotionally detach. It's not that you don't care. It's just that you are not going to be driven by that internal, you know, our emotions are our GPS system. They tell us which way our frequency is going, but many times people believe their emotions as if those are the truth, and sometimes they're not. And that's a hard one to figure out sometimes, especially when you are emotionally sensitive and filled with this. You know, you've got a big open heart. It can be easy to let your emotions drive you around. So these things can be triggered. These foods here can be triggered by emotions. Like your emotions can trigger you to want them, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Because for an example, like usually people crave sugar because there's a lack of joy and sweetness in their life, and so they'll crave sugar to compensate.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So they can be triggered by emotions to consume them, but then they suppress emotion, which is interesting because you have to be emotionally detached but not suppressed. It's like the emotions exist as a like I said, a GPS system, or almost like a thermometer. Like they tell you hot or cold, right direction, wrong direction, or whatnot. But they need to be there, just not driving, if that makes any sense. And I think that's really interesting that these things can be emotionally triggering, and then they can suppress emotions. So that's really interesting, and it's very telling about when you're open to getting these downloads. You're usually in some kind of neutral place where you're not pulling and you're not pushing. You're just there with it.
Exactly.
All right, so these are the foods. These are the foods that can enhance claircognizance. So the first thing is breakfast every morning. Walnuts, pumpkin seeds, flax seeds, beans, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, blueberries, chia seeds, ginger, and celery.
Yeah, so the first thing that comes up is blood sugar. It's so important for most people. I know the odd person is good at fasting, but for the majority of the population, you have to have breakfast to help regulate blood sugar, get blood sugar to a stable level, and eating regularly through the day helps us to stabilize. I often find when people are skipping breakfast, their mood drops right away, their energy drops right away. They don't use the hunger signal to make them hungry, and it can impact metabolism and all kinds of other things. And obviously, the blood sugar and the brain are very connected.
Yes, they are.
Right? Exactly. So that's why it's so important to understand how,
I was just going to say, knowing myself that I'm definitely have blood sugar sensitivity, I can get really irrational when my blood sugar drops, and that is emotional. And that means if I'm irrational, all that tells me is I'm being led by an emotion here. Many times it's a negative emotion. I'm lower in frequency. I'm not open at that point for, divine downloads and receptivity. I'm not connecting. And it's so funny because, you can be eating and still not be satisfying your blood sugar,
Yeah.
hard lesson for some of us to learn. But
Yeah.
yeah, you notice yourself going kind of carb heavy. You tend to go carb heavy. Like for example, I was eating oatmeal and blueberries in the morning, and I was so proud because I'm like, here I am eating oatmeal, for breakfast. It wasn't enough until Amber was like, you should add peanut butter, or like I added almond butter into my oatmeal. What a difference. Like what a complete difference, because my blood sugar was dropping so quickly after I ate it. I didn't notice because in my head I'm like, breakfast, check.
Yeah.
Good things in my stomach, check. Like I was like, this is working, and then it wasn't working. And I was because once you kind of go down that hill too, right? And Amber, you can definitely guide us here, but I noticed for me personally, once I start sliding down that hill, my choices after is just as bad. Like it takes somebody else to help sometimes to kind of like realign on that track. So
yeah, and part of it is because you tend to go into more of an ego-based, I don't care mentality, because your moods drop, your energies drop. And the reason why it's important to add protein and fat in with our carbs is because carbs break down the fastest. Fruits in 30 minutes, vegetables an hour to an hour and a half, and then you've got, an hour and a half to 3 hours, protein 6 hours. So that's a big difference. So if you're just doing your oatmeal with your blueberries, that's why you're having that drop so fast.
Yeah.
There's not a lot to keep,
yeah.
But you add the peanut butter, boom, now you have like an hour and a half to 3 hour breakdown.
Right. And it's so interesting because, it's such a small difference, but it's significant. Yeah. So if anybody else struggles like I was around breakfast time, like just check and see, are there fats? Like obviously there's a lot of positive, healthy fats on this list, right? Let me read it again because I know we got off, but we got walnuts, pumpkin seeds, flax seeds, chia seeds. What are all these things kind of telling you? Those are the good fats, right?
Yeah, the good fats. They have a small amount of protein, because I know some vegans and vegetarians will have them, but definitely the fat, omega-3, 6, 9, and this brain health, right? Like walnuts especially, like they're shaped like a little brain. They're brain food, mood boosting foods for people who suffer with depression, anxiety, and low moods. Like fats are just imperative to help with the boosting of the mood. It's often deficiency, and that can contribute to certain things, certain health imbalances. So that's a big one for sure.
It's so interesting because with claircognizance, what we're really getting here is that emotions have to be in check or balanced, right? And mood has to be balanced for this to be functioning optimally. And when it is, I think what we find with ourselves is that we're just like on it. Like we're on the right track. We're getting the downloads, we're getting the guidance internally, just keeping us going in that right direction. So when you learn how to keep your mood balanced, when you learn how to, right, when you're doing the things that help you stay steady and steady blood sugar, steady mood, things like that, you are like right on line to get some really good psychic downloaded information coming in. I have to laugh because there is a magic food that I've discovered as we're going through this list. It comes up for every single one. And what made me laugh about it is probably this particular food has the most stigma attached to it, at least in movies and TV shows. And it's broccoli. Yeah. Broccoli's like the magic food.
So right. And then they totally put so much negative association to it.
Right. It's always the kids hate broccoli. My kids love broccoli. I don't know where I loved broccoli as a kid. It's tiny trees, but isn't that interesting? Because I talk a lot about social conditioning and social programming as means of like kind of controlling the energy and keeping us suppressed so we don't reach our psychic potential. And here's just one more example of like broccoli shows up in all 4 categories. Right? As this kind of wonder food. It's one of the most like stigmatized foods out there because they really don't, imagine if you were to like regularly ingest this healthy stuff. Look at how much higher your frequency goes and how much more your mind can open up to higher information just from eating more broccoli.
Exactly. And it is like night and day when you get into this and you start to reap the benefits and feel the difference.
Yeah.
And then, when you do have a day, or maybe you go on vacation or you go away and you're just not able to eat the same, and you're able to just tell a bit of a difference or a big difference and go, wow, now I'm really noticing that eating this way does impact my mood, my energy frequency, my dip, right? In a negative or in a positive way.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, there's so many good takeaways here. So thank you so much for talking with me about this, for sitting down to broadcast so that we could share this information with people. I hope that you find it helpful. Maybe you're already leaning towards these things naturally, and now you know why, especially if you're opening yourself up intuitively and you've already been working on it. You are going to go in the positive direction. It's just a result of doing that. But sometimes for me, when I have that little bit of knowledge about how it works, then I get more emotionally invested in like trying to balance, right? Trying to balance the blood sugar, get it invested in it. Look at how it's going to open my mind up to receiving more of that awesome psychic information. So I hope that this has been helpful information for you who are listening. Now, Amber, if they want to have an opportunity to work with you or hear more about the work that you do, because Amber has an incredible site, amberapproved.ca, and she's got recipes. She's got this amazing podcast. How many episodes of your podcast do you have now?
261.
Dang, 261.
5 years.
5 years of podcasting, so much good information. And I know you're in the process of working on some new things coming up. I won't say because I know you're working on it, but there's other ways you can work with Amber privately too. So Amber, what would you direct them to go to if they wanted to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can go to amberapproved.ca. I have a free emotional eating quiz there, all my recipes, my podcast. If you're wanting to connect and have a conversation privately, I offer a 30-minute complimentary body freedom call. So you can fill out the intake form and pick a time, and we can connect and just talk about your health goals, struggles, where you're seeking support. So that's where you can find me. And then I'm on social media, just my first and last name.
Amber Romanuik.
Yeah, Romaniuk, in case people are going, how do I spell that?
I'll make sure it's written. I'll make sure it has nice
Perfect.
words that come up so that they can check it out. And I'll make sure that you have a link to her website so you can just go there directly from this broadcast and check it out. Brain is just, it's like time for more almond butter, I think.
Need more fat.
need more. I need to stay right there because I'm starting to go ka-choo. All right. Well, thank you, Amber. It's been so lovely to talk to you again. And I cannot wait for whatever next magical thing comes up that we get to talk about. As soon as Amber and I discover it, I will beg her to come back and share it with us again.
And thank you for having me. I'm super grateful.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell so that you know the next time I release a new video. Until then, stay magical.